Welcome to College Football Monday, a Sons of Saturday live show brought to you by Jack and Coke. I've got my co-host Sam Jesse here. Sam, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing good. How are you doing tonight, Pete?
I'm doing pretty good. We got our Two Deep show out of the way yesterday, which was nice. So we did the full recap and breakdown on the Stanford W. That's in your feed already. It's on YouTube, all the good stuff. Now, we're not going to do a ton of VT Corner tonight. Almost none. We'll talk a little bit about the Hokies when we get to ACC chatter in a little bit, but this is our national show. And so we're going to go over the chaos that was Saturday in college football, which was awesome. And we'll do stock up, stock down teams later on in the show, as well as our playoff 12. That was a challenge this week, Sam.
It was daunting, to say the least. It's almost like if everyone lost, did anyone lose? Like, that's kind of how I had to approach it, because we knew none of these teams were going to go undefeated, but the fact that they all lost the same week, like, makes it a bit crazy.
Yeah. And I'm going to add, well, I'll wait for the slides later. I have the slides of our playoff 12. We'll get into that. Sam, give us a cheers. I'm actually going to drink some water tonight, but I still want to kick us off with a cheers.
This is my off day of the week. So we are going beer today. Feeling good. I do want to cheers it too. I feel like I've already done this, but like today was the chaos weekend. Like this was, I believe it was like since 2007, the mythical 2007, we haven't had a weekend quite like that. And I think this is setting up to be one of the wilder college football seasons we have ever seen, not just because of the playoff, but because you have a lot of really, really good teams. And then you have a lot of just somewhat good teams.
Yeah.
And then that gets you to like teams 1 through 40. So this is going to be a wild second half of the season.
That's my bad. Cheers, dude. Live show. Sometimes there's things that go wrong. I was trying to check a DM because I had invited a guest tonight and he did get back to me, but I don't think he's going to be joining us. So it's going to be me and Sam, but that's okay because we have a ton to get to. And next week we'll have a guest that's attending the Ole Miss LSU game.
Oh,
so that'll be sweet. Make sure if you have any questions, hop in the chat, like the video, and of course, subscribe to the Sons of Saturday channel if you're here with us. So as we already alluded to, upset Saturday, 5 of the AP top 11 lost. 8 top 10 teams have lost so far this year. And that's another thing that goes back to 2007, because I said on our show last night that through 6 weeks in 2007, it was 9 top 10 teams had lost. Through 6 weeks this year, it's 8. So we're very close to that. And I think as that year wore on, we kept seeing the number 2 team in the country lose. Yeah. So there's still a lot more losses that came in 2007. This has to keep up a pretty steady pace.
And ironically, it was a lot of Big East teams.
Yeah.
So it was like Louisville, South Florida, Rutgers, like UConn was top 10 at one point last year, that season. A little bit different with the SEC this year, but yeah, I mean, there are so many good teams that are fallible in pretty major ways. Like Alabama's secondary isn't just not great, it's bad. Like they have a bad pass defense.
So
Nico
bad.
Imaleva he can make a lot of plays, but dude, maybe there's a reason they were taking the game out of his hands for the first few weeks when they didn't need him, because when they needed him, I mean, he was the last airbender. When the world needed him most, he vanished, dude.
Nico is one of those guys that was in the hype category, in the Avery Johnson, Jackson Arnold. I'm getting that name right for the Oklahoma kid. A bunch of them that, like, not all of them have lived up to the hype. I think Raiola has kind of lived up to it, although still young.
And he's kind of in the same boat, though. He hasn't been great.
Yeah, but he's at least a true freshman. Nico was around Tennessee last year, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to the Bama game. They go down to Vandy, and this is the headliner, of course. 40-35, Vanderbilt gets the win in Nashville. I said last night, despite the fact that Vandy beat us, and we know that we're a decent team, I was still legitimately shocked over this.
Yeah.
I did not see it coming.
It felt like Alabama should be above that at this point. Like they can get upset by number 15 Tennessee or something like that, but not to Vanderbilt. And it was a very almost eerily similar situation to the Virginia Tech game where they dominated the fans. Like it was almost all Alabama fans on one half of the stadium. And there was a weird tipped interception, a big time special teams mistake where Alabama had two guys with the same number on the field. Alabama's offense was fine. It's just defensively, that Vandy offense, if Pavia's making the right reads, I don't want to say they're unstoppable, but like the game can get away from you as a defense really quickly. And it did to Virginia Tech. It almost did to Missouri, and it did to Alabama.
It's unstoppable when you combine it with those fluky things you said.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think overall that this was a fluky victory. Vandy got up 23-7 before Bama started coming back. And I was waiting for the inevitability of Alabama. And it just never happened because Pavia remained efficient. 252 yards on just 16 completions, only 4 incompletions, a 95.9 QBR, second highest in FBS on the weekend. No sacks for Alabama. No sacks. So that's shocking in its own right. Yes, Vandy got a couple turnovers, but like I said, not fluky. Vandy beat them up. They outgained them 26-17, first down advantage. DeBoer definitely has some unfavorable comparisons to Saban this week. That's for sure.
Yeah, I it's not a great look for Kalen DeBoer, but I also think it is. I mean, a lot of people thought this could be a 9-3 Alabama team, right? So nobody really expected this Alabama team to go 12-0 anyways. Obviously, we weren't expecting a loss in Nashville to Vanderbilt, but
not the week after they beat Georgia.
Exactly, but first off, classic letdown spot. That's
yes,
classic
for a normal college football team. They get a big win.
But I'll be honest, like without Nick Saban, isn't Alabama just kind of another normal college football team?
No, because the resources and the talent is off the charts.
Yeah, but like so is Texas, and Texas had these games. So has been, Oregon at a point under Chip Kelly had these games. Ohio State has had them.
There's a reason Nick Saban is the greatest of all time, and it's because he would not have lost this game. I feel pretty confident saying that, considering he had given up 13 points to Vanderbilt combined in the 4 games that he played against them.
Yep.
He would have probably given up more than that because this is a different Vanderbilt team. It is a better team, without a doubt. And I'm happy for Vanderbilt. Like I said, I was really upset because I still felt like we shouldn't have lost to them because we just didn't play football for a half of the game. But this does, at least, whether it's copium or whatever, it makes me feel better about the week 1 loss.
It makes you feel like you didn't lose to Vanderbilt.
To a terrible team.
Yeah, yes, it makes you feel like you lost to, I would say, a team that's probably a average, above average at worst power conference team. Yeah. Like if you were to rank all the power conference teams, Vanderbilt's probably top 20, top 25, top 30 of power conference teams right now.
That's hard to believe when you lose to Georgia State, but like they have Virginia Tech and Alabama, 2 different classes of wins, but 2 good wins already in the season.
And that Georgia State loss is terrible, but it's a really close loss. And then your other loss was on the road in double overtime to Missouri.
Yeah, they played Missouri really tough. And that was one of the reasons we thought Missouri might be fraudulent, and we're going to get to that in a second. Arkansas upsets Tennessee 19-14. Tennessee's offense disappeared. We talked a little bit about Nico already, but just 332 total yards. He was kind of terrible in this one. Sampson did have a good day at running back with 138 and 2 touchdowns, but the Arkansas defense was solid. They had 4 sacks. They basically just gritted this thing out. It was a tough win.
A tough win. They probably could have won by more. I mean, that offense just stalled on drives for Arkansas, but defensively, Arkansas played out of their minds in that game. I feel like Tennessee was a little bit conservative for most of the first half. They weren't really spreading the ball out very much. It did look like they were still trying to protect Nico in that environment, in that situation, much like they did the Oklahoma game. I think the difference was Arkansas made enough plays to like get off the field on defense. Taylor Green made some unbelievable play extensions to keep that Arkansas offense on the field. They shortened the game. Like they did everything needed for that upset.
One of the most amazing things about Arkansas in this game is they got the crap kicked out of him. I mean, Taylor Green had to leave the game. Now he did put up 9.9 yards per attempt and 266 total yards before he had to leave. But two quarterbacks, they lost their running back in this one. They lost a kicker, and they still got the win because Tennessee could only score 14 points. And that is not something we could think is even possible a couple weeks back with Tennessee. And maybe Oklahoma showed teams the blueprint. Like, I don't know. Like,
yeah, it's weird because Tennessee dominated that game, but you saw what Tennessee was trying to do against a better opponent because you couldn't really tell against, Kent State and UT Chattanooga, whoever they were playing. But you could tell against Oklahoma, it's like, oh, this is their go-to stuff right now. And this is what they're not doing. And I think Arkansas saw that and said, okay, we're just going to take away the stuff that we know you want to do. And we're going to make your freshman quarterback make plays. And Tennessee waited and waited and waited and waited throughout that game and ended up killing them. If it wasn't for that Sampson big touchdown run, this game wouldn't have been close. This would have been a 2-touchdown game.
Yeah, that was a long run. It definitely added to their yardage total, which wasn't even very good. 10 penalties for the Vols as well. A little bit of a sloppy day. It's not a terrible loss. And it's funny because you look at Arkansas now, like they lose to A&M in a back and forth game. They lose that game to Oklahoma State that they really shouldn't have lost. I mean, this team is maybe not all that terrible. It's like Taylor Green's a real talent. And so for Tennessee, this isn't like, it's not a horrific loss by any means. No. Like it's on the road. It's a tough team. So they just need to regroup. But you didn't think one of the Tennessee losses was coming here. So it's going to call their playoff chances into question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's very similar to Alabama. Like, okay, we didn't think you were going undefeated, but we didn't think this is how you weren't going undefeated. I think it puts a lot of pressure. That Tennessee-Alabama game, I think here's I don't know if this is a hot take, but it's a take. I think that matchup, if both of those teams go in with one loss, I think it is so much bigger and so much more consequential than if they came in undefeated.
Yeah.
This game, that game might be, I mean, but two losses.
That's in Knoxville too, right?
It's in Knoxville. I mean, it's a de facto playoff game for a shot at the SEC championship and or home field advantage.
It's important. And we're going to get to like the various SEC, like all the SEC teams, these ones at the top that we're talking about, A&M, Tennessee, Bama, Georgia.
Well,
they all like, there's a ton of tough games coming up.
Dude, we'll talk about it with stock up, stock down. And we'll get to this game, I'm sure. But there's an SEC team that is sitting kind of pretty right now.
Are you talking about A&M? Because I'm going to them next.
Let's talk about the Aggies.
Yeah, they crushed Mizzou 41-10. This game was never close, 24-0 at the half. Wegman played really well, despite being questionable for the game. And despite having 0 touchdowns, he still had a 93.7 QBR. The running back Moss had a great day, 138 and 3 touchdowns for him. Daniels had 2 TDs as well, 6 sacks for the A&M defense, just 254 yards allowed. Mike Elko is a freaking wizard.
He's insane, dude. And that's like, so many people were down on A&M. And I had completely turned down A&M. I thought they were going to have a great season. I had their win total over. I have them making the playoff. I was like, let's go A&M. They lose a close one to Notre Dame, and I'm still like, look, this is still a good team. And then I took Mizzou money line this weekend because I was like, I don't see it from this offense.
No.
Wegman is starting. I don't see it here. And like they looked like a team full of 4- and 5-star recruits should look. Like They dominated from start to finish. Missouri, though, I think is almost the bigger story where it's like struggled against Vanderbilt, struggled against Boston College, crushed by Texas A&M. Like
I had no faith in Mizzou. No, they could have won the game. I took A&M. I thought Mizzou didn't play well against BC. They didn't play well against Vanderbilt. And Cook has not looked like the Cook we saw last year.
Mm-mm.
And I think their playoff chances are cooked now. I know it's just one
Yeah.
loss, but they've done nothing to give me any faith that they're not going to catch 2 or 3 more losses.
This is where the easier strength of schedule in the SEC comes back to bite you, because if this team is 10-2, I don't know if they make it in.
Right.
Because, I mean, if they lose at A&M and at Alabama, and those are your 2 losses, I don't know if they make it in over 9-3 Texas A&M, who beat Missouri and has games against Notre Dame and Texas and LSU and so on. So
does Mizzou have a good win? BC win is starting to look worse.
No,
and worse,
because we'll talk about BC.
Yeah. Washington gets revenge, beating Michigan 27-17 in a rematch of the national championships from last year. Washington comes out on top. Turns out, Michigan, when you go on the road, it's not so easy. Now, is it?
Especially to Seattle, dude. That place is insane.
Tuttle started for UM at QB. At least he had the most stats. I actually don't know if he started. I think he did. Just 98 yards passing for him, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. No one can throw on that roster. Orgy got in there for a couple plays. But on the flip side, Will Rogers was pretty excellent for Washington early. 2 touchdowns, 274 total yards, and an 85 QBR for him. Michigan just could not move the ball. Just 287 yards of offense, 2 turnovers. They did have the lead, though, 17-14 at the end of the third quarter. But some sloppy play on both sides, and really, Washington just got the better of it, because on the last 2 of 3 Michigan possessions, they turned the ball over.
If Washington had a better field goal unit, they'd be undefeated and probably top 12 ranked in the country right now.
They should have won the Rutgers game.
Missed 3 field goals against Rutgers. And this is a guy who was Lou Groza watch list, was elite last year, comes in this year, gets the yips against Rutgers, misses another one against Michigan, and then his next kick is blocked against Michigan. But this Washington team, a lot of people wrote them off. I didn't really know what to think about them. They've played really good football, and I understand Michigan is the most one-dimensional you could possibly imagine a non-option team. But what a good win for those guys, and it is going to be really tough for these Big Ten teams to travel out to Oregon, out to Washington, out to USC, and vice versa.
Right. And we just saw it with USC, and that's the next game we're going to go to. But I did want to say first that Michigan's playoff chances are on life support, if not all the way eliminated. They have 2 losses. They've lost 40% of their games. And I know they've played a tough schedule. They have. But they need to run the table, basically, if they want to. And that means a win over Ohio State. And so
I think 8-4 is a pretty realistic expectation for the Wolverines right now.
And that might be the best they can do, honestly.
Yeah, because Illinois is a good team, Indiana's a good team.
They could have lost to Minnesota too. Minnesota came back in that game and almost won it. So let's talk about the Gophers. They take down USC 24-17. And much like you with Missouri, who had them in his playoffs last week, I had USC in my playoffs last week, and only for them to go down on the road. And it was tight throughout. Minnesota punctuated a great game with a 4th-and-1 touchdown run by Max Brosmer, the quarterback. And there was a little bit of a question whether he got in or not.
Were you watching that game?
I wasn't watching it live. I saw it later.
So PJ Fleck is a madman, and I love it. He is perfect for that Minnesota program. And I oddly think he made the right call, because his kicker has another good kicker who's kind of had the yips, and it was really windy. And if you kick a field goal in that situation, Moss is throwing a touchdown on you the next drive. That was going to happen. You needed to make USC know that they had to get a touchdown. He was in by 2 yards. I have no idea how they called that a stop on the field. Yeah. I have no clue. But it was a really good win for Minnesota, who is playing a lot better. Like this team lost to North Carolina to start the year.
And that was an ugly game.
And that was an ugly game. Like I know they kind of want to play ugly games, but if Brosmer, who was an elite FCS quarterback, like if he starts to figure this thing out, Minnesota's going to beat another Big Ten contender this year.
Yeah. He had 3 rushing touchdowns on the day, contributing to an 89.3 QBR. Darius Taylor did the heavy lifting on the ground because Brosmer didn't have a whole lot of yards, but he kept getting in the end zone. Taylor went for 144 for the Gophers, part of their 193 yards on the day. Flying back and forth from LA to the Midwest, like you said, that is just, it's tough for USC, man. They just went to Michigan a couple weeks ago. They played Wisconsin. Now they have to fly back to Minnesota. It's rough. And I wonder if down the road they kind of do something. I mean, I think they did the best they could with trying to spread these games out, but it's a challenge for these conferences now.
I know in college basketball, they do if you make a trip over X amount of miles or something, you can stay overnight. Like you can stay back to back because the rule usually is you have to return to campus in between games. But I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago, they made an exception for basketball. So you could make you could play at Cal on Saturday and at Stanford on Monday and then fly back. I wonder if they will think about that for football, because imagine if you are, USC and you have to play Michigan and Minnesota. Well, hey, most of my players are in online classes anyways. Can I just keep them there?
Right.
Like, I think that might be something they move to, because it's unreasonable for athletic departments to, 1, penny up for the travel for all of this, and 2, it's an unrealistic expectation for a non-professional athlete.
Yeah, it really is. When they're supposed to be going to school too, which we already know is a joke. But
also, I don't think Michigan and USC are particularly easy places to be a student.
No, they're not. They actually, that's very true, Sam. Like those schools tend to take academics a little bit more seriously.
Your professor at USC does not care that you are going to play football. Like your Michigan computer science professor has never seen a football, probably.
So right now, USC is outside of my playoff 12. They can play their way back in, though, if they were to win out. They got Penn State up next and Notre Dame at the end of the year. We'll talk about the game for week 7 at the end of the show. Miami makes a huge fourth quarter comeback against Cal. This was the college game day atmosphere in Berkeley. Canes win 39-38, but I do want to say that those Cal students, what a showing. That was an awesome college game day.
It feels like Cal deserved that win. Like they did everything perfect. I went to bed at the end of the third quarter because I was like, it's late.
I did not stay
tired. This game is over. And it's just like,
I woke up and I was.
But it sounds like as they just stopped playing. It's like they just thought they could run the ball into an 8-man box and punt it away, and that did not work.
No, it didn't. And there was referee shenanigans again.
Yep.
And this is a national show. We're not going to show any Miami bias, particularly because we just got screwed by the officials in the last Miami game. But there was a questionable targeting call, which I think in most circumstances gets upheld, and they took it away. And there's a lot of nuances to it. I don't really want to get into it, but it looked like a textbook targeting call. Yeah. I realized there's he's a runner and this, whatever. The officials took it back. And then at the end of the game, which is more egregious, there was an illegal lineman downfield. Now I know and that's not a call the referees always make, but they do make it. And when it's that critical of a play and it's that important, I feel like you have to make the call.
Yeah. That was, for me, the not calling the illegal man downfield is worse.
Way worse. Yeah.
Because it was 2 different players and they weren't engaged blocking. And it wasn't 2 or 3 yards downfield. These guys were 6 yards past the line of scrimmage.
Mm-hmm.
They were run blocking. I think it is, in all honesty, I don't think there is some conspiracy out there, but I do think there is a little bit of bias on these 50-50 calls. I think if Clemson is in this situation, Clemson probably gets these calls. I think if Florida State is 5-0 and in that situation, they probably get that calls. I think if Tech is 6-0 in that situation, they probably get them. They are definitely leaning towards the better team there. ACC officiating has been terrible.
But this one was weird because it was on the road. Like at least in the Miami game, like we were the road team. So
the HQ
sometimes there's home cooking. Yeah, I don't
know. The targeting for me is like they have not been calling targeting like they used to, especially.
No, it is different. You're right.
So that is one thing. I just think,
and I don't want the official talk either, Sam, to take away from what Cam Ward did in that fourth quarter.
It's insane. Like Miami dominated that game. Cal just had all of these explosive plays over and over and over again. And Miami they're inevitable on offense. Like they are an automatic 35 plus points a game team.
Yeah. So Cal was up 35-10 with 8 minutes left. And that's what I'm talking about. Cam Ward scored 3 touchdowns in the final 11 minutes. He had 277 total yards in the fourth quarter. The guy is a freak. Now he will make the stupidest plays. And you were saying that before the season even started.
Yes.
And he did it. He threw a pick 6 in this game that should have really sealed the deal. Maybe it was too early for that, but like, it's just amazing how dumb of a play he can make and then just be electric for the next 15 minutes.
It makes me wonder if he almost knows that his offense is kind of unstoppable and he's just like, mistakes don't mean as much for them, right? They can cover up mistakes. I think he's not worried. That risk is worth it to him.
Yeah.
And where it isn't for most quarterbacks. I do wonder though, like if you're an NFL scout watching that, Quinn Ewers is starting to look real good.
On the bench. He's hurt.
Dude, Jalen Milroe is starting to look real good.
Yeah. Well, Jalen Milroe just lost to Vanderbilt.
Jalen Milroe's defense just lost it.
That's true. Well, I was going to say about Cam Ward, genius comes chaos, right? Like that's the thing. With genius comes chaos. And when you're that good, the coaches and his teammates, they'll probably just be like, you know what? He's going to do that, but he's also going to do all this. And that all of this was sweet. Now, objectively, Sam, again, we're trying to stay objective. Miami looks extremely beatable. The last 2 teams that they've played consecutively, not only did they need great comebacks, they needed some referee help, and Cal Tech all that good.
Yeah. I mean, they don't look national, like they have national champion numbers, but you watch them play and they don't have national champion film right now. South Florida looks bad. So that the win doesn't look as impressive. They didn't have anything else against Ball State and Florida A&M or whoever. Florida's still not a good team. So that win doesn't look great. I think you could argue right now their best win is Virginia Tech. Like,
yeah,
Cal is good.
I think Cal on the road for game day is probably a slightly better win.
But it's not definitive right now.
And
like they have
a rivalry game to at least
they have two like slightly above average wins right now.
Right. Like they have not been tested against a top tier elite roster, elite team.
Yeah.
And when that happens, they're probably going to lose because they can't fart around like this and expect to beat a Clemson or a Louisville even.
Yeah. And I do wonder though, if they feel a little bit invincible right now. And like, if you have that feeling as a team, we see it all the time. These teams who are just used to winning and expect to win, they find ways to win. Whereas the inverse, teams that are used to losing find ways to lose.
Yeah, we do that.
Yeah, we do that a lot. They might just be one of those teams that finds ways to win. And
which is weird because it's
good.
a Cristobal team and it's a Miami team. And those two things combined are not like necessarily teams you think that are just going to always come back and win.
Like we talked with Cam Underwood a few weeks ago, who covers Miami football as well as anybody. And that was one thing he said, like there is a serious mentality shift that happened this offseason in Coral Gables.
And it does start with Cam.
And it starts with Cam Ward and Damian Martinez and the guys that they brought in on the defensive side of the ball, coaches that they brought in. Like Cristobal is still Cristobal, and he is like doing this with talent, not scheme right now. But who knows, dude? Who knows?
They could very well end up with an undefeated record at the end of the year, skimming by a bunch of teams and then get their asses handed to them by Clemson or even beat Clemson and then get served up an L.
I think you have
in
to
the
say
playoffs.
they are, if you're looking at who could be the 1 seed in the playoffs, they have to be the betting favorite to be the overall 1 seed.
Oh, give me a break, Sam.
If they go 12-0, win the ACC, they're the 1 seed. Texas has to play Georgia and Texas A&M.
But if they won all those games, they'd be the 1 seed. I think
It's much more likely Miami wins out, though.
It's much more likely, but I think a 1-loss Texas would still be the 1 seed.
Really? Over an undefeated Miami team?
Yes, I do.
Interesting.
They went into Michigan and they won. They would have to have beaten Georgia. They'd have to have beaten the SEC championship game, win that game. So that's a long way off, but I'll tell you right now, does this Miami team look like they're going undefeated?
I honestly, yeah, they kind of do, because they look like they can't lose right now, no matter what anybody else does.
I saw two different Miami games where they were down 10 and 25. So you can't do that against a good team, is what I'm trying to say. And that's fully throwing Virginia Tech under the bus.
But who's the good team that they play?
They play Louisville. And they'll have to play Clemson, or they'll have to play Clemson.
I think it is. I think
I don't know how you can look at what they did the last 2 weeks and think they're going to go undefeated.
What I'm seeing in my head right now is either they have a game against a random team,
Syracuse last game of the year,
Syracuse in the Dome last game of the year, or they get wiped off the field by Clemson and Charlotte. Like, it's one of those. Like, I don't see them losing 2, to be honest.
I think their offense is championship caliber. I don't think the defense is there.
They let up a lot of explosive plays.
And I when it comes to do I think they're on the same level as Clemson or even an Alabama or a Tennessee? I really don't.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll see, dude. We'll see. They're such a weird team too. Like, they're dominating these games. They allowed Tech and Cal to get a bunch of big plays.
They make too many mistakes, and they've had a coach that has a history of mistakes. You know what? I'm sorry to the Miami fans that are listening to me. I'm going to get hate in the comments, I'm sure. But I'm just trying to be realistic. Look what we just saw. As a Miami fan, you can't love what you just saw the last 2 weeks.
I'm going to be honest. I think they just like the chaos.
Maybe
I think Miami fans just kind of live for it.
All right. SMU wins in Louisville 34-27. Perhaps a new contender has emerged in the ACC. Louisville was playing catch up the whole game. They never led. And there was a weird stat that Preston Stone threw the only touchdown pass for SMU.
It does kind of seem like if SMU had figured out the quarterback thing, they'd be in a much better shape right now. Excuse me, my voice is a little hoarse right now. Maybe drinking some beer will help it.
But yeah, Kevin Jennings played a great game for them. His QBR was off the charts, nearly 400 total yards, but they brought in Stone for one play, and it was 1 shot, 1 kill, and they got the touchdown.
Shades of Ryan Willis versus North Carolina.
Right. Tyler Shuck himself put up 329 yards passing for Louisville, but he did have an interception. 86 yards of Louisville's yards did come on the one play to Brooks. 6 tackles for loss for the SMU defense. It's not a great defense, and we were having this conversation with Robert Irby earlier today, but they do make plays, and those plays led to points, and this was a big W to go into Louisville, the team that played in the ACC title game last year, and get a win when you were touchdown underdogs. It's a nice W.
And we talked about this before. Louisville's not a team that loses at home very often. So to get that win on the road is huge. I would also say Louisville might be another one of those teams like Miami. Offense, really, really good. Defense has not looked good. Mobile quarterbacks have killed them. They've allowed a ton of big plays. I don't want to say Louisville is schedule merchants because they do have some big wins in there, but they've played 2 tough teams this year and they've lost to both, and they've given up a lot of yards and points to both. They had a really easy schedule last year and kind of coasted with that. I'm curious to see if Louisville can get some of these big wins because the last 2 weeks, they've looked good as a team.
Mm-hmm.
That offense has looked good, but the defense has been really bad.
Yeah, and losing to Notre Dame, is not shameful. And even losing to SMU isn't shameful, but you were at home and you were favored. You've got Jeff Brom, who everyone praises. You've got a quarterback in Shuck that's one of the better ones you've had. Like he's
Yeah.
not really been the issue.
No,
And
he's been good. He's been
yeah,
good.
so it's weird. They're just not playing that good of football.
No, and maybe they'll turn it on here towards the end of the season. They certainly have a coaching staff that can get guys ready to play and game prep and stuff like that. But weird team.
On the flip side, the schedule sets up real nice for the Mustangs. You're talking about Miami's schedule, which is favorable. This is even better, I think.
Dude, they coming into the season, I had them rated as having the easiest schedule in Power 4 conferences of Power 4 conference teams. With the way Florida State has looked, that is even to a higher magnitude. They do have some tricky games, though. Pitt is a really tough game for a team that is.
Well, they go on the road twice.
Defensively.
They have to go to Stanford, which we know, hey, if we can go there and whip ass, like SMU should be able to. Then they go to Duke, and Duke isn't bad. You know, they played
bad.
The Yellow Jackets tough, and it's on the road, back-to-back roadies. That could
Something
be tough
like
for
that
SMU.
could happen. I mean,
and then Pitt at home.
Pitt is who all of a sudden has a great offense that throws the ball a lot.
Holstein's pretty good.
I don't know, man. I don't know what's going on here.
But SMU, if we're trying to get Tech into the championship game over a team like SMU, like that's going. Tech could go 7-1, and they could still get left out of the championship game.
Yeah,
like there are those kind of possibilities.
I almost think it's at a point now where if you look at how the schedule is setting up, if somebody not named Clemson, Miami, or SMU wants to get into the title game, or Pitt, I'll throw Pitt in there.
Yeah, Pitt too.
You're going to have like a string of upsets. Like you're going to have a weekend like we just had
in the
exclusively in the ACC. Like it is going to be really tough for the middle of this conference to jump into that championship game.
Yeah, there's probably a good 7 or 8 teams that are already eliminated from the ACC title race.
Like I'm going to be honest. I think if you're Tech, you need Clemson to screw up somewhere and then to beat Clemson at home. Me, if I'm looking at the schedule, that's kind of your best case scenario if you're Tech.
With the loss against Miami, you more or less, barring a Miami complete collapse, which I don't predict, you need to beat Clemson and pretty much go 7-1 because SMU, I think they'll catch 2 losses. I really do, even with how easy it is, because they're, coming just from the G5. Are they really going to go undefeated or 7-1 in the ACC?
Maybe. I don't think so. Like I thought this was going to be like a 7-5 team, and they looked like a 7-5 team at best for a few weeks. But once Jennings was kind of the guy, and once they figured stuff out, they got it. I mean, their only loss was to a top 20 BYU team.
Yeah, I know. I know. And now that they've figured out the quarterback, it would seem they could be in a better position. I just think like in 3 weeks from now, Sam, well, they're off next week. So talk to me in a month after they've gone to Duke and played Pitt.
I'll put it in my calendar.
And let's see what happens, because I think they might end up losing 2 of those games.
I oddly think, and here's college football mind going, Stanford and Duke are the 2 styles of teams that could throw SMU for a loop. They love playing up and down fast games. Stanford and Duke are going to run the ball, try to play defense, try to stop the run the clock. That could throw a wrench into a team that wants to play really fast. And we've seen organizationally, SMU is not very good.
SMU needs to be careful against the better defensive teams.
Yeah.
Because they can get scored upon. Like SMU is going to have a game where they give up a bunch of points. So a Pitt who plays some good defense from time to time, at least historically. Stanford, we know the rush defense is pretty solid. And Duke with Manny Diaz. So it's going to be interesting, their next 3 games. Syracuse beats UNLV in a wild Friday night finish, 44-41 in overtime. 'Cuse came out firing, went up 14-0. And then it was quickly 21-14 UNLV. And I was like, because I had taken 'Cuse to cover 6.5. They were the underdogs. I was feeling real good. And then I didn't know what was going to happen for the next 40 minutes of this game because it was wacky. There was some weird stuff, some muff punts. I think there was a scoop and score on one of those punts.
There was a block punt.
A block punt. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And then LaQuint Allen, he ran tough for the Orange, 71 yards and 2 touchdowns. McCord does what he does. It was 355 and 3 touchdowns. The other quarterback, Haj Malik Willis, who's better than Sluka, who left the team, had a fantastic game as well. 277 and 3 touchdowns for him. And Gadsden, when we play Syracuse, this is a side note, but like when we play Syracuse, I'm terrified of what Gadsden's going to do to us.
Yeah, they scheme. I mean, he's a great player, but they also do a great job scheming him open. This is a wild game to watch at a bar, by the way, because every time I looked up, there was a new score. This is a really good win for Syracuse. They are a very up and down team. They will continue to be a very up and down team. I'm staying away from betting any Syracuse game because I don't know what team is going to show up. I don't think they know what team is going to show up.
Right. Like, how did they lose to Stanford at home? I really don't get that. When
I don't
you
know,
see
man.
that they can go down in Vegas and do this. Like, this is an oddly, like, one of the best ACC wins of the season.
Especially if UNLV like keeps it up and like
right.
wins more Mountain West games. Like, that could be a really good win for Syracuse.
Perfect segue to Boise State because they cruise. We're not really talking about their game, but we are going to talk about Genty because he went over 1,000 yards in just 5 games. He didn't even play the second half, Sam. And he had 186 yards and 3 touchdowns at halftime. And them and UNLV are going to play. I think Boise plays Oregon State coming up too, who's 4-1.
Yep.
And so there's some fun stuff that's happening. Now, I wasn't sure about this, and I looked it up today, that Oregon State and Washington State cannot win. Not only can they not win a 2-team Pac-12, they can't win the Mountain West either.
No,
like they're not allowed to play in the championship game.
They are stuck, which is kind of unfortunate because this Oregon State team they got the OT win at home against Colorado State. The Giovanni McCoy, if you don't know who that is, quarterback for Oregon State, transfer from Idaho. The dude is electric. They got a good team. So that's kind of unfortunate, but I just pulled up Boise State's schedule.
2 weeks from now.
Yeah,
that's
they
a
have
Friday night.
Friday night in Las Vegas. They also traveled to Hawaii. Hawaii's like played a lot of close games, but hasn't looked great. And then they have San Diego State, who doesn't look good. Nevada, who doesn't look good. San Jose State, that could be a sneaky tough game on the road. They'll play on the road at Wyoming, who's not a good Wyoming team.
No,
and then they end the season at home on a Friday against Oregon State. Local kickoff time for that game against Oregon State. Guess what it is?
Local?
Boise time.
Boise time, 8 p.m.?
10 a.m.
Oh, complete other way.
Yep. That's weird, isn't it?
That's real weird. But yeah, that Friday night game in 2 weeks, 10:25, they play UNLV. That is going to be a fun game.
But we have to talk about this. Bud Elliott from CBS Sports covered.
Oh wait, let me get the break in before we do this.
Oh, okay, got it.
As I said at the top of the show, College Football Monday is brought to you by Jack and Coke. 2 legends, 1 can. Jack and Coke. You can see the can right on the screen. The #1 cocktail in the world is now available in a can. It's true. Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey mixed with Coca-Cola or Coca-Cola Zero Sugar is now available in a can at your local grocery and convenience stores. 2 legends, 1 can. Jack and Coke, ready to drink. And as always, when you're enjoying Jack and Coke or any other alcoholic beverage, please drink responsibly. You were going to mention Bud Elliott and his playoff predictions.
Yes, so he had. And I'm gonna pull him up here on Twitter as well. But he had Boise State as one of the teams getting a bye. Now,
which
all that means is that they are one of the 4 highest ranked conference champions. That's all.
Which means he has them ahead of the Big 12 champion.
He has them ahead of Big 12 champion, which right now looks like is Iowa State, who he has all the way down the 11th seed. Now,
so he's basically projecting Boise to win out.
Boise to win out and the Big 12 to cannibalize itself is what he's projecting, which might actually makes a lot of sense. I don't know if so there are 2 ways that I think about this, and this is very late night college football analysis here. I could see the college football playoff committee saying, "Oh, you know what we don't want? Boise State hosting one of these playoff games in 35,000 seat Albertson Stadium in Boise, Idaho in December outside. Yeah, we don't want that matchup. So maybe they would slide them all the way to the 4th seed so that they don't have a home game, so that they can play that game at
Now,
a
I would think
big
it would
site.
almost go the other way, because like that's such a great venue in college football to showcase. It would be awesome.
But we're college football fans, and we think that they aren't. They're
Yeah.
big suits and a
Well,
hotel
here's
complex.
what they could do to get out of that, Sam. They
just rank them like 12th.
ninth. Yeah.
Yeah,
They put them at 9.
if with the way this season is going, if they went out, like I think Boise State might just like stumble their way to like number 6 in the country. If they keep winning out and Genty is putting up these numbers, like, because if teams lose above them, they're just going to slot one ahead, and they're going to keep going.
I don't think that Boise is this like unstoppable force.
They aren't.
They're good. They're a good team, but I don't think they're going to win out. I really don't.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't personally, I don't see a team on there that can stop them.
UNLV or Oregon State can beat them.
They can. And they got to play UNLV twice, and they got to play them. I believe the Mountain West still plays at the 1 seed's home stadium.
I was going to do this later, but let's do it now because I have a G5 rundown here.
Okay,
and I'm going to ask you for the best G5 team. Okay. Not even like, I'm not even talking really playoff chances. I'm thinking what you think the best football team is in the G5 if it's not after Boise State. If it's not Boise State, who is it? But before we get to that, Sam, JMU lost to ULM 21-19. Navy smacked Air Force 34-7. I know Air Force isn't good. I still thought that was a very solid win. Army crushed Tulsa 49-7. And Tulane dropped 70 on UAB. And so with all that in mind and the stuff we've already said about Boise and UNLV, who is the best G5 team after Boise State?
So
do you want some candidates?
I think right now it has to be one of the service academies.
I mean,
Navy has the best win.
They beat
against Memphis, right? So I got to give Navy over Memphis. I mean, this is don't tell the other people in the Norfolk, Newport News, Virginia Beach area, but this is a go Army beat Navy household. So I'm going to predict Army to win that game. I think Army's defense is better. Like I don't know, dude. Like it's got to be Navy. It's not UNLV. It's not UNLV. I don't think. And
I think it could be Tulane.
It could be Tulane, but like
they're 2 losses. Look at their 2 losses.
I don't know if they're in the playoff hunt though at this point.
Well,
because of those 2 losses,
exactly. Their losses are to Oklahoma and Kansas State.
No, that's very true. No, they're playing really well. John Summerall he's got a little bit of ruthless coach in him. He and Kirk Cignetti are kind of out for blood. I will also say though, like UAB, excuse me, their players have quit. Like they are not interested in playing football. Like I took Army -25 today.
Dilfer's a weirdo too.
It is great golfer, not a good football coach. That program has died once. They're playing like zombies right now.
So so for me, it's Navy or it's Tulane in my head. I think that
makes sense to me.
Right after that, it's
Army's played nobody.
ULM. I think ULM's pretty darn good.
What a stupid correct answer that you just had right there.
I know they beat JMU, who hung 70 on UNC. Like, is that booty?
Well, okay, so back it up with JMU. Booty is the quarterback for ULM. JMU beat Gardner Webb by like 2.
Yeah.
And lost to Louisiana Monroe. If you were to tell me that would happen at the beginning of the year, I would have felt a lot better about betting JMU under 8 wins. But
you have to throw Liberty in there if we're going to.
Yeah, I think Liberty is the team that a lot of people are forgetting about. I don't know what they'll do with that finding a 12th game. They just Liberty doesn't have a chance to prove themselves against a team that is even remotely in the top 100.
Sam Houston
is playing good. I'll tell you,
they're 5-1.
They are playing good. I would still say Texas State has talent-wise. I think Texas State is probably up there.
I think so too. like Tulane, they have the 2 losses already. So
Yep.
it's gonna hurt their
And
chances.
it's Arizona State looks really good. We'll talk about them later. And that
North
Sam Houston
Texas.
loss they had by a bunch. North Texas, yeah, man. It's for me. I think though, if you're looking at playoffs, it's Boise State, UNLV. It's the 2 service academies, Memphis, Tulane, and I think after that, you're going to have to take some real leaps to get there.
One more shout out, Toledo. Toledo is having a low key nice year.
The MAC is awful. Like this is since I started really seriously covering and watching college football and diving into it. This is the worst MAC I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's
far.
pretty rough. It's pretty rough.
Toledo is the best team in that conference, and they got waxed by Western Kentucky.
True. Yeah.
Bowling Green is trying their best, but it's not great.
Yeah. Though, did you notice that Coastal's also 4-1? The only loss being to UVA. They just beat ODU.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see when they get into more Sun Belt games.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Sun Belt's not as good this year as it's been in the past either.
The mid-major conferences are pretty down right now.
Well, now that we've lost every listener by going in deep on the G5,
it's gone up. The number has gone up. I've been checking it out. This is to me like this is way more interesting than if we were covering Tech versus Stanford.
Yeah. So let's get to the other ACC games just to finish out those notes. Clemson did take care of business against Florida State, 29-13. Klubnik, another strong performance, 300 total yards. Maffa, 154 on 25 carries. Bright spot for FSU, Brock Glenn. He was better than DJU. They didn't have a whole lot of yards because they couldn't run the ball, but Glenn himself, 228, almost an 80 QBR.
Yeah,
it's pretty good.
Yeah. Take Florida State will be fine in 2025.
They're 1-5 right now.
They will be fine in 2025.
UVA takes down BC. This is of note because we play BC next. 24-14, 18 fourth quarter points for the Hoos. Impressive win. Calandria was fine, but the BC turnovers and the penalties were really the story. I do give credit to UVA's defense, though. Yep. They really kept Castellanos in check, who has sneakily had some bad games back to back.
Kind of a mirror image of last year for Boston College right now. Not as bad to start the year, but once they start like week after week playing higher level athletes, it starts to fall apart.
Pitt beat UNC 34-24 to move to 5-0. They are ranked. They finally won a game in Chapel Hill. That hadn't happened in quite some time, maybe ever.
It's been a while.
It had been eluding them. And then Wake served up a painful loss for NC State. Talked a little bit about it last night, but Bachmeier and Bailey were 14th and 15th ranked quarterbacks in the conference this week. So it was pretty ugly. Neither of the quarterbacks played particularly well.
Who is the best team in the state of North Carolina?
It's got to be Duke, right?
I guess. I don't know, dude.
They came back from 20 points to beat UNC by 1.
Jeez.
Claiborne went off for Wake. He scored 2 TDs in the fourth and 3 on the day to get the comeback win, and Wake got the win in Raleigh. So you had Pitt finally getting a win in UNC and Wake finally getting a win in Raleigh. NC State's nightmare season is in full effect. GT beat Duke to round out the ACC here, 24-14. All of these, I feel like I already read that, but all these games were 24-14, 34-24, 24-14. Jamal Haynes had a great game, 245 yards rushing total for Georgia Tech. That's a game GT should have won. They covered just barely, but
I know. I had Duke plus 9.5. Duke is going to play ugly games, but I think they're going to come out on the losing side of pretty much all of them coming forward. Like they just don't have anything really offensively right now, and I don't know how long their defense can last. Like if they get 1 or 2 injuries defensively, they're toast.
Yeah, Malik Murphy is. I don't know if he doesn't have the weapons, but I just don't think he's that great of a quarterback.
Eli Pankel's okay. They have a couple good runners, but they're just not. They're a couple injuries away from the train going off the tracks, I think.
And Virginia Tech beat Stanford. That's the real round out of the ACC, 31-7. Other notable games, Sam, and this is just the teams who didn't fall victim to upset Saturday. Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, Penn State, Ole Miss, Iowa State, and Indiana all took care of their business. They were all ranked. They all won. And none of them struggled as far as I could tell.
Nope.
Which isn't easy on a weekend like we just had. Texas Tech, this was a big low-key victory here. Took down Arizona. Oh, you got the Texas Tech shirt on. Nice. To move to 5-1. Get the pistols out. West Virginia effectively ended OK State's season with a kind of a crushing defeat there. Arizona State now 4-1 after beating Kansas, who is also having a nightmare season, 1-5.
They've had a ton of close losses, but they've had those close losses because their defense can't play 60 minutes. Like they give up so many backbreaking drives. I'm going to pat myself on the back being right about Arizona State. Like they play really hard. They have a ton of dudes. They offensively had taken huge steps forward, defensively taken steps forward. They're 4-1. They have wins against Kansas and Texas State. They host Utah on Saturday night, and I am thinking about Sun Devils money line because the way they're playing right now is not like a team with a win total of 4.5. They are playing like a team who's going to compete to make the Big 12 title game.
I really like their coach.
He's really good.
Yeah,
he's really good.
Even I want to say like 2 years ago, or maybe it was a year ago, hearing him talk before a practice when they're all banged up and just not having a great season. I was like, man, I really like what this guy has to say. And he seems down to earth, stealing a page out of Prize Book. He gets it, which probably not a favorite phrase these days around Virginia Tech, but nevertheless, Kenny Dillingham gets it. And it's cool to see them, both Arizona schools, kind of kicking butt right now.
Well, except for Arizona.
Oh, wait, you're right. They just lost. They lost to Texas Tech. But they got the win over Utah. So, yeah, this Big 12 is weird.
Texas Tech is 5-1.
I know. That like they were struggling so bad early on in the year. I didn't see this. And you know what? The team that they turned it around against was North Texas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they just like put it on them. North Texas, that's their only loss.
Crazy.
Nebraska beat Rutgers 14-7, ugly game. Mm-hmm. And Wisconsin crushed Purdue. Purdue is the worst Power 5 team, and it is by such a significant margin.
Literally the last good football game Purdue played was the game at Virginia Tech last year.
Come on, man.
With a 6-hour rain delay. After that, they have been, without doubt, the worst Power 4 team.
Oh, God.
They are horrific. I think they are in clean house territory right now.
I mean, Walters he's in trouble, man. He's in trouble.
Yeah.
So we already went through the G5 stuff. So let's go to stock up and stock down, Sam. Let me ask you first for your stock down teams.
We got Mizzou. I mean, they are on fraud watch. It just looks like defensively they aren't as stout as they were last year, which we feared. Offensively, it's not clicking right now. I know they have an easier schedule, but I don't see them getting to that 10-win mark right now with the way they're playing. Michigan. They are back to pre-COVID Michigan right now. They don't have an offense. Yeah. Their defense is elite, but not elite enough. I just don't see them competing with the better teams in the Big Ten. Like, they couldn't beat Washington. Doesn't look good for Penn State and Ohio State or Oregon. And then USC. They're not ready for the Midwest. They're ready for the Big Ten. They are not ready for the Midwest. I think they are going to have to figure out how to do this cross-country travel because they haven't been awake offensively for either of these games.
Yeah, I had USC and Mizzou on my list. At least for both of those teams, those games were on the road. But Mizzou got crushed, so way stock down. They're not very good. USC, I still have hope because in that Michigan game, Michigan had to have like a miraculous comeback at home to beat them. And the Minnesota game was close. And so USC still has goals in front of them, potential playoffs in front of them. They just need to beat Penn State at home this upcoming weekend, and they need to beat Notre Dame at home at the end of the year. They both get both of those games at home. And so they'll have a chance if they're not flying back and forth to the Midwest every weekend. Michigan, I agree with you. Like, whenever they play on the road this year, it could very well be a loss. Like they didn't test themselves on the road, and they did play some tough teams. I'm not saying they didn't play tough teams early on, but now that you're in conference play and you've already got 2 losses, like I don't know.
Yeah.
My last stock down team, Louisville.
Oh, that's a great point.
This is not what I expected out of this Louisville team. Because I thought if Louisville struggles, it's because they chose wrong in the portal on the quarterback. I didn't believe in Chuck, but like I said earlier, he's not the issue. And so, didn't they also lose Penny to another school in the portal? They had a couple of those defections in the portal.
We talked
and Tyler Barron, right?
Yeah, we talked preseason that they had some bad vibes in fall camp. Like they were a bad vibes team. And I think because they dominated those early season games by so much, we thought, oh, it's fine. The bad vibes might have been right. Like it's just not, it doesn't look good right now for Louisville.
They have a chance to write their season when they play Miami. Kind of like, okay, what were you supposed to be? Show us when you play Miami a little bit later on. Actually, that might not even be that much later on. I think that could be coming up relatively soon.
It's in 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Stock up. I'll go first. I got Texas A&M stock way up because after they lost to Notre Dame, I wasn't a huge Notre Dame believer, but they've turned out to be pretty good despite the NIU loss. And Texas A&M crushing Mizzou, who was a very good team last year, very impressive. SMU, stock up, pretty self-explanatory. Syracuse, stock up. I thought going out there and getting that win in Las Vegas was impressive, especially since they already, beat Georgia Tech, and then they lose to Stanford, and I'm like, I don't know what this team is. And then they proved they can beat a ranked team. And I know it's a G5 team, but UNLV is a good team.
There's a little bit of like proof of concept stuff happening at Syracuse. Like this season could have gone pretty bad for them. If you look at how they built this team and the lack of offensive and defensive line they have, like they built it with skill positions.
Yeah.
Really young coaching staff, but they're going to need some of these wins to keep.
They got to stack the wins now because I keep saying later in the year they will not have the depth on the lines. I don't think. Now they could stay healthy and they could be just fine, but I think depth throughout the season is going to be their issue.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
All right, what are your stock ups?
Well, I got A&M.
Okay.
Sneaky 3-0 in the SEC.
Ooh.
And only one of those games has been at home. So when you look at who are your favorites to make it to Atlanta for the SEC title game, I don't think Texas A&M would go into that top group of favorites right now, but they're 3-0. They have some more winnable games out there, especially with the way their defense plays. And that game against Texas at home, like is the most throw out the record game to ever exist. I think that might be one of the biggest games in college football history, regular season. Like I saw a thing today where tickets are going for like $8,000.
Oh, Jesus!
It is going to be.
It's in Kyle Field, right?
It is in College Station. It is. That is going to be a spectacle. I have Washington up there. Program win, if I dare say so. Like they're not
Jed
going
Fish
to go
say
anywhere.
Program?
Probably not, but they're not going anywhere. Like their fan support is elite. They have a great home field advantage. They're always going to be able to get talent. They're not going anywhere in this Big Ten. Like they're going to be a top of the conference team. And then I have Arizona State, 4-1. You get a big home win. They had a crowd at that game, which is really good for Arizona State because I know they have 100,000 students, but they don't always show up to the football games. I think Kenny Dillingham's building something there. And that Big 12, not only this year, but moving forward, that Big 12 is wide open. And with the facilities they have being located in Phoenix, like Arizona State has a chance here to.
I mean, the Arizona schools
grow up.
in general have always been those sleeping giants because of the massive student populations and where they're located and all this stuff. Now, they don't have the most fertile recruiting grounds, but you can go into California, you can go into Texas. And so it's fascinating and definitely a spot where you can win in the Big 12. And so,
and I think this weekend, like if they beat Utah, they are one of my top 3 to make the Big 12 title game if they win that game.
Yeah, I could. Geez, oh man! All right,
isn't that wild?
We got to talk about our playoff predictions. So before we get to Sam's playoff 12 and my playoff 12, I want to tell you that we're brought to you by Roback And Roback is a company you guys know, the performance activewear designed for those who crave activity. They have the VT polos. They have the VT pullover. They have the VT hoodie. And they're beautiful. The Commonwealth is available in both colors. They have the game day polo from Virginia Tech. They have the TV hoodie, which is so gorgeous. Use code 2DBT to get 20% off your order at roback.com. They have great women's stuff. Throw a bunch of stuff in there. Get some things for your wife. Get her the dress. Get her the tennis skirt, the joggers. Grab yourself a polo. Maybe you have another team in the house that you also root for. Grab one of those polos too. I just saw a Notre Dame polo on there, which was pretty fire. Like it was the helmet and shamrocks. It was sweet. And I'm not a huge Notre Dame guy over here, but my cousin did go there, and their gear always looks pretty darn good. I'm jealous I don't get to wear it. But go there, load up your cart, use code 2DBT for 20% off. Roback Crave Activity. All right, let me get these up on the screen. Now, I like to usually have a little discussion about the AP poll, but we're going to kind of incorporate that into our playoff predictions because that's just what matters more. Give the old MacBook a second. I'm due for a new one, man. Let me tell you what. I'm going to get yours up first here.
We'll see if we can put that in next year's budget.
This one is from 2017. So
geez.
That's
has flipped that switch.
Dude, it's about to die on me any given podcast. So here's Sam's playoff picks as of 10-7. You can see he's jammed up that SEC slot. So
I mean, and here's the reason for that is it's not because I'm this SEC homer, but I don't know who else you put in from the other conferences at this point. And I mean, Alabama and Georgia, I think, are a given. I understand Alabama lost that game, but they're a given. Texas, given. Ole Miss and Texas A&M, I think, are the teams that are sneaky 10-2. I think A&M can get in with 9-3, looking at their schedule. Ole Miss probably has to win 10. But again, with that schedule, they have one of the more favorable SEC schedules, and they have a lot of opportunities for really good wins against teams like LSU. So Ole Miss and A&M I have in there with the three obvious ones from the SEC.
So you dropped Tennessee and you
did.
Dropped Mizzou, which is natural.
Okay. Mizzou, natural. Tennessee, I just don't see them beating. Tennessee would have to show me something that they haven't shown yet.
From the Big Ten, Sam has Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State still. From the ACC has Clemson and Miami. From the Big 12, you are high on Iowa State, winning that.
Sticking with Iowa State. They keep rolling.
Boise as the G5. We just got a message from Thomas Train saying Army instead of Boise.
I would love that.
Could happen.
I would love that. I'm all for it. But I think even if Army goes undefeated, I don't know if does that Navy game even count? I don't think the second Navy game would even count if both of those teams go undefeated, because I think the playoff would be decided by then.
I think they would hold it out. I think I don't know. I really don't know, but
I don't know.
What this comes down to is how many teams is the SEC getting in? Are they getting 4 or are they getting 5? And a lot of that depends, Sam, on my pick, Notre Dame.
Yep.
I have Notre Dame this is the first time I've put them in a prediction. Maybe my conversation about the Roback shirt was a little bit, foreshadowing, but I have had 4 SEC teams in, I think last time because I had USC in. Before that, I had 5 like you, but I'm leaving Alabama in there. Bud Elliott, noticeably on he not only did he have Boise as the 4 seed, he had Alabama out of his playoffs. I don't know if you noticed that. Tennessee, I still have in. And the reason being, they get Bama at home and Georgia on the road. Those are their 2 toughest games. I think they can win one of those games. And if they win one, they're 10-2 with a win in Norman and a win over one of those 2 teams.
Can I ask you a quick hypothetical?
Sure.
9-3 Tennessee or 10-2 Penn State?
It depends on where the wins are with Tennessee, but they're going to have to go. You said 9-3?
9-3 Tennessee.
If Tennessee does not, if they don't beat Bama or Georgia, then I'd put Penn State in.
All right.
Because
I think Notre Dame is the wild card in all of this. And I think to be honest, Notre Dame made this playoff the way they did so that they could be the wild card team to screw everything up.
Right, because it's taking a slot from the Big Ten or the SEC more than likely. Now it might end up taking the ACC slot too, because I still have Clemson and Miami both making it. My Big 12 champ is BYU, and I put them in last time. I'm sticking with it. I don't feel good about any of the potential picks, but I think I like Kansas State the most, and BYU beat them.
Yep.
And so what I'm kind of basing my Big 12 thought process on now, Sam, is like, who has the best shot of getting to the Big 12 championship game? And BYU has one of the better shots of just about anybody of getting there. And so if they can get there, they could potentially win.
It does feel like the Big 12 is all up to, is Cam Rising healthy or not? If Cam Rising is healthy, it's Utah. If he's not, it is a free-for-all.
Now, let me switch back to yours real quick, because you do have A&M in there. And you'll notice I have Notre Dame in there. Notre Dame has the head-to-head. So if it comes down to we're fighting for the last spot, they're not going to put in Texas A&M over Notre Dame if the losses are even. I don't think.
It depends on how bad they think that NIU loss is. And it doesn't look like that NIU loss is going to get better. Like,
but
I think
Notre Dame has been beating the crap out of everybody else. And and at the end of the year, Notre Dame can make a statement because they're going to play at USC. And if I'm obviously projecting right now to be a Notre Dame win. Last week, I was projecting it to be a loss. I have changed my tune based on what happened on the field. But one of USC or Notre Dame, if they win out, one of them is going to be in this playoff. And like,
this is crazy, dude.
And the SEC scenarios are preposterous. Like they really are ridiculous, because if you look at who has the toughest schedule, you have Ole Miss in your playoff. Ole Miss has to go to LSU. They have Oklahoma at home. They have to go to Arkansas, which we know can beat anybody, and they have to play Georgia. And so Ole Miss has a tough ass run, and it starts this weekend. So I left them off, even though they probably have just as good a chance as any of these other teams. But if you look at the future schedules, like A&M has one of the easiest schedules, but however good they are will prop Notre Dame up.
That's fair. That's a really good point too about Notre Dame. I'm a little bit worried for Notre Dame's sake that if USC drops another here, they could have only one good win, whereas even 9-3 Texas A&M or 10-2 Texas A&M would have multiple really good wins. And I don't know how, like, head-to-head does mean something, and it definitely should mean something, but the fact that that was a week 1 game, and the fact that, like, the resume is what they're going to look at, the blind resume, I think, more than the head-to-head. If they treat this like they would the March Madness. But dude, I know
what you're saying. And you know what's a very interesting thought? If you look at all the teams in the SEC, we're talking about A&M, LSU. No, we're not even talking about LSU. Forget LSU.
LSU is still in this thing.
They're in this thing, but neither of us have them in the playoff. We haven't really conversed about them, and I'm kind of leaving them out of this conversation. But Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, Ole Miss, A&M. Those are the 6 teams that we're playing with to potentially get in here. And at the end of the season, Georgia, they'll have played at Texas. They'll have played at Ole Miss. They'll have played Tennessee. They already have a loss to Bama, which means Bama has a head-to-head against Georgia. So, like, that's going to prop Alabama up. So what I'm thinking is, at the end of the year, Sam, we could have a conversation. Is it Georgia or A&M getting in? And
I don't.
And A&M has the Mizzou win. Georgia has the Clemson win. And they're both very similar wins, if you think about it. Like, they're dominating wins against teams that are, I think Clemson's a little bit better than Mizzou, but, like, not too much different there. And so there's a chance. I know Georgia seems like this, like, mythical beast, and they're Georgia, so they're going to get in. But, like, they could lose to Texas, they could lose to Ole Miss, and they could lose to Tennessee, and they've already got a loss.
I also wonder here, with Clemson's strength of schedule, is starting to not look great. App State is not a good team. NC State is not a good team. Hold on, I'm trying to read it. I was telling all the Miami fans Vandy was way more physical than you guys. Nobody believed me. Told you guys Vandy was / is no pushover.
It's true. They are not.
It is true. They're not a pushover. Like, we're giving the ACC 2 teams in because of how dominant those 2 teams have been, and the brands I think are big enough.
Brands, and they're going to win a lot of games because the conference isn't very good.
I could see them screwing over the ACC here.
I could see it. Yeah, for sure.
For a like if Notre Dame is in the picture, I understand what you're saying with Notre Dame takes a spot from the SEC because of that win over Texas A&M, because the SEC would already have 4 teams in there. I would not be surprised, though, if when it comes down to a decision, they put in A&M and Notre Dame both, or they put in Ole Miss or whoever, and take away the loser of the ACC title game. I would not be surprised, because they're just, if you look at Miami and Clemson schedules, like neither of those teams are going to have an elite win.
Yeah, well, you know who's not going to have an elite win unless they do some serious work here is Ole Miss, because they don't have one. Everyone on this list so far, Alabama has beaten Georgia, Tennessee has beaten Oklahoma, Georgia has beaten Clemson, and Texas has beaten Michigan. Ole Miss has nothing right now. So they have work to do. And they're not the brand that these other schools are. So if anyone's getting left out, Ole Miss is probably going to get left out at the end of this. And I think Miami and Clemson, if they are 1 or 2 losses each, they're going to have a very good shot at getting in. Now that's a different. I want to have the Penn State conversation real quick, because Penn State's number 4 in the country according to the AP poll. I have not been impressed by Penn State at all. They sleptwalked through the beginning of the UCLA game, and you're talking about a UCLA team that's coming from the West Coast playing at noon, and you sleptwalk through the first quarter. Like, I don't know how good Penn State is. They're about to fly to the West Coast and probably catch a loss to USC. At least that's what I think is going to happen. And then I'm serious, man. I don't know if the Big Ten should get more than 2 teams in this. And we're going to see the top 2 teams go at it this weekend in Ohio State and Oregon. So one of them is catching a loss too.
We're not talking about the team that would throw the biggest wrench into all of this, because there's only going to be one G5 team, right? We've kind of figured that out by now. There's a team who only plays one of the top 3 teams in their conference, and they only have 2 road games remaining, and they are currently 6-0. That's the Indiana Hoosiers. Indiana plays Nebraska. Indiana has a bye week, and then they host Nebraska. Then they host Washington, at Michigan State, host Michigan, at Ohio State, Purdue.
Look,
it is very, very, very likely
they're playing
Indiana
well.
finds their way to Indianapolis for the Big Ten.
They're playing well right now. They are. And Kirk Cignetti, like, he can keep talking his crap as long as they keep winning. But I remember last year when Kirk Cignetti had game day and an undefeated JMU team, and he lost to a mediocre App State team. So let me tell you something. Indiana's going to screw something up. Now, it doesn't mean that they can't be 10-2. And if they are 10-2 in the Big Ten, I think this is where you're going to have to look at schedules. This isn't just oh, they're in the Big Ten and they're 10-2. Ole Miss, they're in the SEC and they're 10-2. You have to end up beating someone good at some point. But to me, if Indiana makes the playoff because they're 10-2 or 11-1 or whatever, they're taking a spot from Penn State. They're not. Oh yeah, they're not going to give Indiana a 4th spot, or because Penn State, like, yes, they have their whole season in front of them. They're undefeated. I just, what are they? Like, I like, they're good. They're going to lose to Ohio State in a couple weeks. They're probably going to lose to USC. And if they don't, then I'll eat crow. And hey, I have them in my playoff because their schedule's favorable. And they have a very good shot at going 10-2, but I could easily see them losing more games. Yeah, I'm just saying, dude, like, I don't know if they leave out a double-digit win team from the SEC or Big Ten. Yeah, no. They no, that other comment might make sense. Because Arkansas, as they were a team that's like midseason firing their coach was the talk of the town. Like Sam Pittman probably saved his job with that win. And that Vandy offense, dude, is if they are making there's not a lot you can do if they're making the right reads. The comment says, really not. I was more surprised that Tennessee lost to Arkansas than Bama to Vandy because he was at the NC State Tennessee game and Tennessee looked very, very dominant. But I think the difference with Tennessee is that they don't have an elite quarterback. They just don't. And
Not yet.
who at this point, like, who does? Like, Quinn Ewers is banged up. Carson Beck may be elite, but really struggled for the first half against Bama. Nico, just mentioned him. And Milrow is probably your best answer, but they just lost to Vanderbilt because their defense isn't very good. So it's I don't know. And we're not even talking about Pitt, who's undefeated. And that's what Thomas Train just said. How many games does Pitt win?
8 or 9.
Yeah, I think 8. I think 9's probably the right answer because I didn't expect them to be 5-0, but now here they are.
It was a big comeback. I mean, they've beaten an FCS team in Youngstown State, a terrible team in Kent State, came back down double digits against Cincinnati and West Virginia, 10-point win at North Carolina, and that's a team that's probably going to clean house at the end of this year as well.
Right. Salty Pat has a QB is what Thomas also says, and that's true. But like they're very lucky to be 5-0.
Yeah.
And they haven't played they've beaten a bunch of power teams, but they're not good power teams. And they're probably going to catch at least 3 losses. At least 3.
They could lose the next 3 games. Cal, Syracuse, at SMU. They could lose all 3 of those games.
They could. They got the algorithm.
Virginia, like that's a game that Virginia wins. Virginia always has these like one upset win a year in the ACC. Like Virginia could win that game. Then they have Clemson, Louisville, and at Boston College.
Yeah, so I feel okay.
Well,
after watching this past weekend, I did not want to make these playoff picks because this is a challenge. I don't feel good about having Penn State in there. I don't necessarily feel good about having Notre Dame in there. I put a team in there that lost to NIU. I got a team in there that just lost to Vanderbilt. I got a team that sleptwalked against UCLA of all teams. So it's just like, I don't know what's going on right now. We're doing the best we can, but as of 10-7, this is what we got.
12 teams have to make it in, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
So somebody in that 12 team pool is going to have had 1, probably 2 really bad weekends.
All right. Before we go, Sam, let's just talk a little bit about the week 7 games. Penn State at USC. Mentioned it many times. Okay. USC plus 5.5 at home. They're the dogs. Home dogs. Another home dog? Well, that's Oregon. They are plus 4 taking on Ohio State. Biggest game of the weekend. Game of the century of the week. 2 versus 3. Gonna be real fun. How are you feeling about that game? Like the matchup of it?
I placed Oregon moneyline bet today.
Okay.
I'm also an Oregon national title ticket holder, so there's that as well. I think people are writing off Oregon a little too quickly when they've won these games in dominant fashion and they have not played their best yet. And that Boise State win is starting to look pretty good.
It really is.
And so I think this is like, if Dylan Gabriel cannot throw interceptions at the goal line, this team is pretty darn good.
Yeah,
they've been dominant defensively, absolutely dominant defensively. And even with less than stellar play from their starting quarterback, they've been really good offensively.
And that's just not, if Ohio State goes in there and does win and cover, that's a hell of a win.
I think if Ohio State goes in there and wins that game and covers the field goal spread, they are probably like their national title line might move to like plus 300, plus 350. Like they would be the absolute favorite to win a national title if they win that.
Yeah, because they haven't been tested. I know they just played Iowa, but like
it's a bad Iowa team. But
yeah, Iowa had no chance in that game.
From what we've seen so far in college football, specifically with the going into a hostile environment after the travel, it does look like that travel is playing a factor. So give me the Ducks at home. Hashtag addicted to quack.
I think Ohio State's going to win. Covering, I got it at 4. I don't know if I don't know what our pick'em has it, but like
I saw it 3.5 today.
Okay.
But so it's going to bounce around field goal to 4 points. Usually the big games don't move that much.
No spread from me. I just think Ohio State gets the win. And maybe that's dumb because they haven't been tested, but like that roster is so loaded. The defense is good.
Stacked.
Knowles is a good defensive coordinator. Chip Kelly's a great offensive coordinator. I want to see what Ohio State can really do. They haven't even shown us yet.
Yeah, it's going to be a great game. I'm really excited to watch that.
Ole Miss at LSU is going to be fire as well. Last year, those teams played an instant classic. So it is a 2.5 point home dog in LSU, another one. And then we've also got Texas and Oklahoma. This is in a neutral site, but Oklahoma is a 14-point underdog in this one. You mentioned the Texas A&M throughout the records later in the year. That's what this is every year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Red River, it doesn't matter who's the better team on paper and who's starting for Texas.
Does it matter?
Yes.
I don't think it does, dude.
I
think it'll be yours. I feel like, though, this is like every 4 or 5 years, this game is a blowout. I think this could be a blowout game.
The problem is Oklahoma can't score.
Oklahoma is 130th in the country in explosive offensive plays. Texas is number 1 in the country in defense, keeping teams from explosive plays. I said that's so weird, but
I knew
the point stands.
I knew what you were getting at. And
yeah,
because of the way last year went, and it being Texas's only loss before the playoff, they're going to be out for blood. There's no Dylan Gabriel on the Oklahoma sideline this year. The quarterbacks are way worse than him. They have their offensive line's way worse. I like Texas. I don't know if they can cover 14 points, but I like Texas.
It's a lot. I would, if I'm betting that game, I probably tease it to 13.5. I pay up a little bit for that.
If LSU wins this Ole Miss game, are they going to enter our playoff discussion?
Probably. Ole Miss hasn't won in Tiger Stadium since 2008.
Yeah, I mean it's not an easy place to win, and so we talked very little about LSU, but if Brian Kelly gets this win, they're going to launch themselves into the playoff conversation for sure. Kansas State at Colorado was the last game of note I had. Well, not the last one, but Colorado +6, and then we got Florida at Tennessee. It's not really a big deal, but then Arizona at BYU, I did think was interesting because that's a losable game for BYU.
Absolutely is, and Arizona has been a very Jekyll and Hyde team, and so if good Arizona shows up, they might win that game.
They already won a game in Utah this year. Mm-hmm. A very, it was a very good win. Cal at Pitt, mentioned that. Pitt 3.5-point favorites, and ACC wise, Louisville at UVA. UVA +7.5 home dog. Is UVA live?
No.
Okay.
No. I did have before we head off here. We're hitting that 90-minute mark. I told you I had some trivia for you about the Bama Vanderbilt game, right? So Alabama lost to Vanderbilt as the number 1 team in the country, and they were a 3-touchdown favorite. When was the last time the AP number 1 team lost the game outright as a 3+ touchdown favorite?
AP number 1, 3+ touchdown favorite.
I'll give you a hint. It is a upset that has happened 3 separate times in very similar fashion, all in the same stadium too.
Auburn, Alabama?
No, it's not a rivalry game.
Okay.
But it is, the game has a name. The original game has a name. And this was part 2 of 3. There's a shirt on home field about it. Like it's a known thing.
Is it wide right?
It is not wide right. It is the Giant Slayers of Oregon State when they beat USC in 2008.
Oh, Corvallis.
That was the last time. That has happened. Oregon State has beaten USC when USC was number 1 at 3 times.
That's crazy, man. That is really crazy. I was thinking, like, I said wide right because I know it's a game that has a name, but it is a rivalry.
That was a good guess. That was a good guess though. But yeah, the Giant Slayers, part 2 of the Giant Slayers.
I didn't know that had a name, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I never heard that Giant Slayer name.
I think the first game was like in the 50s.
Okay.
And then it was 2008 was Giant Slayers part 2, and then it happened again in like 2011, 2012, something like that. But yeah, that's a really unprecedented. I mean, we're talking 16 years of college football,
right? Since
that had happened. That's an unprecedented.
That's what
upset.
I was thinking. Like, I was trying to rack my brain for number 1 going down, and it
doesn't happen a lot
for whatever reason. Like, I just have a hard time of remembering. Oh, this is when they were not. Like, I remember the big upsets and the big wins, but I don't necessarily remember that the team was number 1.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Oregon State. There's some Corvallis magic because whether it was when Oregon's good, those games are always can go one way or the other. But there was another one. Oh, when Stanford beat USC in hardball, right? Like that was
Yes.
well, USC was number one a lot over a period of time.
Yes. So that was the time. That was the next time that, if you go back in history, that happened.
Okay.
Was that Stanford game? Stanford 24, USC 23.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that game was awesome too.
One of the most consequential games in college football history, you could argue. That started Harbaugh's career.
It launched
and
Harbaugh, yeah.
And it was the start to the end of the USC dynasty with Pete Carroll.
Yeah. Yeah, you had just asked the other day, like, how many times has Tech played a national champion during the season over the last 24 years? Like, since the year 2000, we're not even including 1999 when we lost the national championship, but like, how many times has Virginia Tech played the eventual national championship during the regular season? And if you include the ACC championship game in 2016, when we lost to Clemson, it's 6 different years. Like 6 out of 24 years, we have played the national champion.
Miami, you're up next.
Yeah. And oh God. And hey, one of those years we beat that national champion.
That's true.
I'd actually, well, that's what I'm trying to think about now. Like, how many times did we beat that team? I think only once.
It seemed only once.
Because 01 Miami, we came close, but we didn't win. And then it was 01 Miami, it was 07 LSU, 04 USC. That's why USC came to mind there. 2009 Bama, 2016 Clemson, and 2014 Ohio State.
The only other one of those that was really close, other than the Miami game, was the Clemson ACC title game. Was a touchdown game.
That's true. Yeah, that was an awesome game. Just an awesome game. Anyway, that's going to do it for the pod. If you made it till the end, do we have a safe word, Sam?
Yeah, Sycamore.
Sycamore. Oh, you got the beer again. Nice.
Yeah,
we didn't talk about your beer, but you did have that one before.
Yeah, this is the pumpkin latte blonde from Sycamore. It's one of my favorite fall beers I've ever had, dude. I love this beer.
Great brewery. Great brewery. Billy was I think he was spent most of the day there the other day when we played Stanford or Miami. He was telling me, he's like, it's great layout, and they know the GM. So if we ever want to like chat a little beer with Sycamore, I think we could figure that out.
I'm down.
All right. So make sure you subscribe to Sons of Saturday channel on YouTube, Sons of Saturday podcast, because we're going to be bringing Hokey Hoops to you later this week. We got Memory Lane coming up on the 2 Deep feed later this week. So make sure you subscribe to both 2 Deep and Sons of Saturday. And until next time, go Hokies.
Go Hokies.